واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك بك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
أفلح من أعاد الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our respected scholar, Sheikh Mahdi, and dear families, we welcome you all to the majalis of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, to the Muharram program for this year hosted by the Ashura project. Peace be upon Hussein alayhi salam, upon Ali, son of Hussein, upon the children of Hussein, upon the companions of Hussein. Tonight, my brothers and sisters, we commemorate the first night of Muharram. Tonight we follow in the teachings of our Prophet ﷺ and his holy progeny, peace be upon them. Tonight we emulate our role models, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, in mourning and lamenting and commemorating the struggle of truth and faith in the face of treachery, despotism, and godlessness. Tonight, we commemorate, to commemorate like the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam did, and we also commemorate to learn submissiveness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to desire, to learn God-wariness, to learn discipline, to resist evil and falsehood, to learn God-wariness, to learn discipline, to distinguish between the friend and the foe, to prioritize and to self-change. And these nights are keys to unlock both our minds and our hearts, to attain that change, and that is because our cure is within us. Our guidance is within us, and our willpower and reason all come from within us. And hence the theme, Hussein, the light within. Our dear Sheikh Mahdi Rastani was born and raised in the US. He finished high school in the Islamic Republic of Iran and then joined the Islamic Seminary of Qom for 6 years of introductory and intermediate studies before attending his Bahth al-Kharij advanced classes taught by Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Mahmoud Hashim al-Shahrudi rahmatullahi alayh. Sheikh Mahdi is currently a resident scholar at the City of Knowledge Islamic Center in Dallas, Texas, and an instructor at Mizan Institute. Please help me welcome Sheikh Mahdi for tonight's lecture with a loud salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Recite aloud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad wa ajjal fil أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's an honor to be again here with our dear brothers and sisters from this community. I pray that inshallah what we go through over the following 10 nights is of benefit to our dear audience as well as to the speaker himself. A big thanks before I begin to the dear brothers and sisters who have worked very hard leading up to this Ashura, and I'm sure will be working very hard as we go through this Ashura to make these majalis possible for us. For them, for their families, for all of those who work behind the scenes to make these majalis as well as other majalis possible for us. Another loud salawat. The topic that we'll be discussing tonight and tomorrow night, inshallah, is the topic of building an Islamic identity. This is a topic that is even more crucial for us to discuss as Muslims living in this part of the world. Because the reality is, growing up from the very beginning, you start to notice something about your life that is different from the lives of the people around you. Everyone else, when you start to go to school, might be celebrating certain holidays. You might come home one day very happy. You tell your baba, you tell your mom, everyone's celebrating Christmas. They tell you, no, this is not something that we celebrate. From a very young age, you notice that you're doing things very differently in your household. You might get a little bit older, get into middle school, get into high school. You see your friends, they are engaging with the opposite gender, they have relationships, it's a very normal thing. Valentine's Day is a thing, taking people to Prime is a thing. You come home, your parents will tell you, no, this is not allowed in our faith, you have to do things differently. You go out with your friends from school sometimes, for your colleagues, your peers, they go out to eat some food, you can't necessarily eat that food. All of a sudden you see things are different in your life, every step of the way. You make it into college, you find almost everybody in college is experiencing with drugs and alcohol and all sorts of things. And at the very least, theoretically, you and I know that we're not supposed to engage with these things. Move on to, you're getting married now. You look at your wedding, you look at the Instagram-worthy wedding of a non-Muslim couple, and you see these weddings are quite different from each other, or at least they're supposed to be. And so every step of the way, you start to realize that you do things differently in this society. It seems as though the way you do things and the way the normal person within society or the average person within society does things are quite different from each other. And this gives rise to a question, puts a question into all of our minds, and that is, what is my place in my role in this society? Who am I? What is my identity? Because clearly, I'm not just one of the members of this society. Clearly, I do things differently compared to the way they do things. They're living their lives one way, I'm living my life a different way. Who am I? What is my identity? What is my place within society? So you ask yourself that question, and you start to realize the answer to that question is far more complex and complicated than you thought, Because in reality, when you look at your own life, you realize that you identify in a multitude of different ways. Sometimes you identify based on your ethnicity. You might say, I'm Arab, I'm Iranian, I'm Pakistani, whatever the case might be. Sometimes you identify based on your career. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm this, I'm that. Sometimes you identify based on your last name. Some last names are so well known, it's an identity in and of itself. Sometimes you identify based on where you grew up. You say, I'm American, I'm Canadian, I'm this, I'm that, and all these other sorts of identities that you can think of. But at the end of the day, which one of these are you? Am I Muslim? Am I an American Muslim? Am I Muslim American? How do I identify? What is my identity? And the reason why this discussion is so crucial to us is because your identity and your conduct and your behavior are always tied to one another. Anytime you want to see how someone is acting in life, it has to do with how they see themselves. It has to do with how they identify, what they consider to be their identity. Therefore, it is crucial for us tonight and tomorrow night to take some time to understand who am I, what does Islam say about my identity, and that will in turn then determine for me how I'm going to live my life. And in order to delve into this topic, we'll pose the following questions. Number one, how is the conduct and the behavior of the human being always tied to his identity and the way he sees himself? Number two, what are the different ways that we identify? And if we have different ways that we identify, which one of them is the most foundational, the most crucial to who I am? Number three, how does the Quran speak of the identity of the human being and our origin story? Number four, how does Imam Ali speak of our origin and those moments when we used to be in the womb of our mother? Number five, what does the Quran mean and what is it talking about? When the Quran says, the one who forgets about God, he will forget who he is himself. And number six, and finally, how do the lines in Salatul Mayyit, this salat that we perform after everything in the life of a person is all set and done, how do these lines show us the true identity of the human being? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 6 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Let us begin from here. When you look at Islam as a religion, it comes with many rules and regulations. So many do's and don'ts. And so before we get into all of these do's and don'ts, you can't dress like this, you can't eat this, you can't listen to this, you can't look at this, you can't do this, you can't do that. First, we have to understand what is my identity. Otherwise, I'm always going to struggle with these do's and don'ts of Islam. Because I'm always going to feel as though someone else is coming and taking away my liberties and my freedom as a human being. Someone is coming, this religion, this Islam, this God, whoever it might be, is coming and telling me what to do, what not to do with my life. As long as I see myself as an independent being, as someone who has authority over his own life, I will feel like someone is intervening in my life all the time. But if I identify in a different way, if I understand who I am, well, then things are going to be very, very different from one another. And the reason why this topic is so crucial is because we said that the identity of the human being is fundamentally what will define his behavior and his conduct. The way you see yourself, the understanding you have of who you are, is what's going to dictate what you will do when you're in a situation where you have to make a decision. There are some of your friends you come across, they sleep very late at night. You automatically give them an identity. Say, this friend of mine is a night owl. That's it. He takes on this identity. Yes? Now when you're hanging out with him, he says, listen, Baba, you know who I am. I'm a night owl. I'm going to stay up. I'm not going to go to sleep until 2 a.m. Yes? Fajr is something else. We'll figure out Fajr later. Yes? But he says, this is my identity. This is who I am. You have another friend. Yes? He wakes up very early in the morning. This friend of yours is the type of person who wants to wake up early. And God forbid, he's the type of person who wants to let everyone else know that he woke up early. Yes, that type of a friend is a problem. but you give him an identity. It's an early bird. That's what he does. The moment you give him that identity, that is going to determine his behavior, his conduct. That's what you expect of him. These two are always tied to one another very, very closely. I'll give you an analogy so you understand this better. Imagine one night, your mother tells you, go and put the trash out. Yes, it's late at night because she told you earlier you didn't do it. Yes, but now it's okay, it's late at night. Go put this trash out. You want to take the trash out down the driveway. It's dark. For some of us, it might be scary. Imagine you're going down this driveway, carrying this trash with you, and in the bushes, you start to hear some noise. I think we've all been there. You hear this noise. Some of us, of course, will run back, yeah? We'll be back in the house. But when you hear this sound in the bushes, what's the first question you ask yourself? First question you ask yourself is, what is this? You want to figure out its identity. What is it? Is it a dog? Is it a cat? Is it a cute little rabbit? Is it a snake? God forbid, God forbid, God forbid. The worst of all, is it a rat? Yes, the rat is probably the worst of all. Even though the snake can kill you, but still the rat is the worst case scenario, yes? You want to figure out what this thing is. Why? Because you want to figure out what it's going to do. The identity of that thing that's moving around in the bush will determine for you how it's going to act and what it's going to do. If you can pinpoint its identity, then you'll know, am I supposed to run back to my house? Or can I just be brave and move forward? The identity of everything is going to determine how that thing is going to do things. Okay, great. Oh Allah, can you just tell us what our identity is? Why can't Islam just tell us what our identity is? So we start to look into our identities. The problem is you identify in a million different ways. Sometimes you identify based off of your economic status. Sometimes you identify based off of your ethnicity, where you grew up, what type of food you like. Some people even identify based off of where they went to school, the college they went to. That's what they identify based off of. All of a sudden, they do some weird symbols towards each other. You realize, well, they went to the same high school. They went to the same college, for example. Yes? We identify in so many different ways. So then the problem starts and begins from this point. And that is where sometimes some of these identities start to contradict one another. They start to overlap with one another. Like one identity is asking you to do one thing, another identity is asking you to do another thing. You're stuck in this situation. What am I supposed to do? Who am I? Give you a simple example. Your friends call you. They say, listen, we're going to go. We're going to spend some time tonight. Yes, we're going to hang out tonight. This is your identity as a friend, calling you to go and attend, go and spend time. And then you get a call from the family. Well, we're going to go and check and see our relatives tonight. So your identities are doing what now? They are contradicting one another. Now you're stuck. You don't know, am I supposed to go this way? Am I supposed to go that way? And you will see that every single human being who's ever lived and is living right now and will ever live will be in this position, and they will always prefer one identity over the other when they start to overlap. Always give importance and preference to one of these identities over the other one. This is very key. This is the key to our discussion. And he always gives a preference to that identity that's more crucial and is closer to who he really is more foundational to who he is. That's what he does. So if his friends call him, even if he's not Muslim, if his friends call him, say, hey, we're going to go spend time. And then his wife calls him and says, listen, we have to go to the hospital. I'm hoping, I'm praying that he's actually going to do what? He's going to give preference to that relationship that he has in the household. He'll say, you know what? I'm more of a husband than I am a friend right now. This one is more foundational to who I am. Yeah, I am a friend too. Other situations, I would be going out, spending time, all that kind of stuff. But you know, when these two contradict each other, I'm going to give importance and preference to that identity that is more foundational to who I am. So he goes, spends time with the family. You switch this up. Sometimes his identity as a friend contradicts his identity as an employee of an organization or corporation. Yes? They call him into work, but then his friend calls him and says, listen, I need your time for this issue or that issue. Yes? This is contradicting with one another. He's being pulled from two different directions. And ideally, if he's the right friend for you, he will call back and say, listen, right now, I'm more of a friend than I am an employee. So I'll call into work and tell them I can't come because this is a very crucial moment in your life and you really need my help, and so on and so forth. Muslim or non-Muslim, your identities are always going to clash with each other. And when they clash, you always give preference to one of these identities over the other one. Yes, this is understood. This is very clear. And Islam expects the same thing from you and I. Islam says, listen, you have 100 different identities. Figure out which one of them is the most foundational to you. And then if they ever clash, never override the most foundational one. Never override that one. Don't take this one for granted. Never prefer anything over this one, because this one is the most foundational to who you are. This is what Islam wants from us. I can have a million different identities, no problem. If they ever clash with that most foundational identity, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from us to give preference to that identity. Okay, wonderful, I get it, I understand. Let's move on. Ya Allah, what is my most foundational identity that if any other identity or role were to ever contradict it, I have to give preference to this one? This is where the discussion gets a little humbling. Yes? It's going to take a little bit of humility. So you knock on the door of the Quran. Can you tell us what our most foundational identity is? Who are we at our very core? And the Quran says, sure, I can tell you that. It's going to be a little humbling, but let me tell you what that is. You see, your most foundational identity, what really makes you who you are at your very core, is that you are a servant. Because the thing is, you don't own anything. Because you don't own anything, you don't have ownership over anything, you have to serve the one who gave you the stuff you have. And this is the difficult part, because you and I sit there and say, wait a second, excuse me, I think there's been some kind of a mistake. I kind of have my own life and I make my own decisions and I have a career and friends and all of this. I'm an independent being. So what do you mean servant this, servant that? Serve who? I have all these things in life. I own a house, I have a career, I own a car, I have this, I have that. And the Quran says, yeah, you know all that stuff you have, someone gave them to you. None of them belong to you. You have nothing to your name. You don't own anything. Say, but all this stuff I have a whole life. It says, yeah, but somebody else gave you all of that. You didn't have any of that. And so, because you don't have any ownership, you also don't have any authority over your own life. So what's my identity? The Quran will say, oh, your identity, yeah. Because you don't own anything, you have to go serve the one who owns everything in your life. This is how it works. Authority comes from ownership. If someone walks onto your lawn, you can turn around to them and say, listen, you need to leave my house right now. What gives you permission to tell them, go leave my house? It's the fact you own the house. Ownership. Okay, bismillah, the stuff in your life, the Quran will say, oh, you don't own any of them. Well, if I don't own any of them, well then I have no authority over my life. That's your identity. You're like, no, but I don't think it works like that. I'm kind of an important person, you know? I sit, I talk, people listen, you know, I kind of have a little thing going for myself in my life. And the Quran says, listen, somebody else gave you all of that. You want me to demonstrate for you how you had nothing and then someone else gave you all of that? Let's go back to your origin story. Let's see where you came from. So you go to Surah Al-Tariq, verse 5 through 7. The Quran says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانَ مِمَّا خُلِقْ. The human being should think sometimes where he came from. You should take a little trip back, yes, in your history, and remember where you came from, because now you're acting like you own a bunch of stuff. You don't own anything. You're kind of a nobody in front of God. Yes, in society you have rights, you're independent, all of that makes sense, yeah? But in your relationship with God, you don't really own too much. Okay, so where did I come from? He says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ مِمَّا خُلِقْ. He should take a look of where he came from. Okay, so where did I come from? خُلِقَ مِن مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ. You came from a drop of fluid. Oh, wait a second. I thought I was like kind of important. You are important. From other angles, you are important. But from this angle, you were empty-handed. You had nothing. خُلِقَ مِن مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ يَخْرُجُ مِن بَيْنِ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ. Yes, it comes from the loins and so on and so forth. This is who you used to be. I say, Ya Allah, but I thought I was really important. He says, listen, let's go a little bit back. If we go a little bit further back, it's not even that drop of fluid. You were like almost nothing before I made you into something. I was the one who made you who you are. Otherwise, on your own, you had nothing to your name. So then Surah Al-Insan, which sometimes we refer to as Surah Al-Ata, has 3 beautiful verses. When you go home tonight, take a look at these 3 verses. Yes, Surah Al-Ata. The first 3 verses is all of our life in a nutshell, essentially. 3 verses. The first verse starts out like this. It says, هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ حِينٌ مِنَ الدَّهْرِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. Does the human being not remember there was a time he wasn't even worthy of mention? That's who you used to be. Yes, now you're sitting here, you're a full-fledged human being with consciousness, intellect, so on and so forth, a whole life of your own, yes. But someone brought you this far. Someone else did all of this. So now your identity is to serve him. Nothing to your own name. Nothing from yourself. Your ears, your eyes, your consciousness, your intellect, your mind. All of this came from somewhere else. The Quran says, listen, you don't own any of these things. This is why the Quran says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns everything. وَأَنْتُمُ الْفُقَرَاءُ. You guys are empty-handed. The human being is empty-handed. He doesn't own anything. You want to go a little bit deeper to understand who you are? You know, Islamic philosophers, they talk about this. It's a long discussion, but I'll simplify it just so you get the terminology. Islamic philosophers call you and I a mumkin. Mumkin. Mumkin means what? Mumkin means that thing that's so weak, if it wants to exist, something else has to want it to exist. Otherwise, it can't even stand on its own 2 feet. This is mumkin. Mumkin is that thing, that existence, that in its own existence and in everything it does, it needs someone else to come and do it for him. His heart needs to beat, someone else has to come do it. His lungs have to work, someone else has to come do it. His blood has to run through it, somebody else. He needs eyes, someone else has to. Ears, someone else. So what's my identity? You're that thing that can't even exist on its own. That's who you are. That is foundationally our identity. That is the most foundational identity that we have as human beings. This is why the Quran says, by the way, your existence is so flimsy that if God wanted to wipe you out and then bring in another group of people, he could do that. It's not like once he created you, he's stuck with you. Like, you can't do anything about it. No. وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ. If I wanted to, I could wipe you out, bring out another group of people. And you know what? It's very easy for me because your existence is so flimsy. Removing it, bringing it, it's like a flip second. Just a split second I can do it. So he says, وَمَا أَمْرُنَا إِلَّا وَاحِدًا. When we want to get stuff done, it takes us 1 moment. إِلَّا كَلَمْحٍ بِالْبَصَرِ. It's like you bat your eyes. That's what we can do. That's how flimsy of an existence you and I have. Now with this flimsy existence, we're standing there with nothing to our name, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I'm like, well, I don't think so. I don't know if I want to trust you so much and this and that. Baba, you don't own anything. You're not in a position of authority. You know, sometimes you go into negotiations, right? When you're negotiating with the other person, you need some leverage. You need something, ownership over something, so that you can point towards it. Recite a salawat, please. You need something you own so you can point towards it and say, oh, well, if you don't give us this, we own this. You're in a position of authority. And God's saying, listen, you're not in a position of authority. Everything you want to do, I have to do it for you. What authority? What ownership? You can't breathe on your own. Huh. This is why Ali ibn Abi Talib in Nahj al-Balagha, he explained so beautifully in one of his khutbahs how we came to be the human beings that we are. It's very humbling khutbah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, listen, let me tell you who you are. He says, أيها المخلوق السوي. Oh, the one who, first of all, makhluq, someone else had to create you. As-sawi. Someone else had to come in and organize your affairs. Yes? خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى means the one who created the human being and then he organized him. He put him into proportions. Yes, your head is going to be here, your arms, your limbs, your organs, so on. All the headache of the design of the human being. This is فَسَوَّى. This is أيها المخلوق السوي والمنشأ المرعي في ظلمات الأرحام. You are the one who God brought you forward through the darknesses of the wombs. Generation after generation after generation, you were part of this body, then this body, then this body, then this body. In the darknesses of the wombs, when people didn't even know who you are, there was someone who had to hold your hand and bring you all this way. You don't own anything. We're not in a position of authority with God. وَمُضَاعَفَاتُ الْأَسْتَارِ, and you were hidden behind multiple layers. بُدِئْتَ مِن سُلَالَةٍ مِن طِينٍ, your creation started from a speck of dust. And then what happened? وَوُضِعْتَ فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ إِلَى قَدَرٍ مَعْلُومٍ, then someone brought you and put you into a place of residence for a certain period of time. He says, تَمُورُ فِي بَطْنِ أُمِّكَ جَنِينًا. You were going from one corner to the other corner of the womb of your mother. You were just in the womb of your mother. لا تحير دعاء ولا تسمع نداء. You were so insignificant, no one could speak to you and you couldn't communicate with anybody. This is who you were. Don't approach God from a position of authority because it's not true. There's no reality to it. You don't own anything. I don't own anything. It's a difficult pill to swallow. He says, you came from there. ثُمَّ أُخْرِجْتَ مِن مَقَرِّكَ إِلَى دَارٍ, then God brought you out into a world لَمْ تَشْهَدْهَا وَلَمْ تَعْرِفْ سُبُلَ مَنَافِعِهَا. This is very beautiful. He says, then God brought you into this world. You were born, yeah? But even when He brought you into this world, you didn't even know the basics of life. And then He asked this one question. He says, فَمَنْ هَدَاكَ لِاجْتِرَارِ الْغِذَاءِ مِنْ ثَدْيِ أُمِّكَ. He says, who taught you to go to your mother when you were hungry? Oh. Who taught you that? You say, oh no, Sheikh, if you study science, we have some doctors in the community, they said this comes naturally to the child. No, the stuff that came naturally to the child, someone inspired this child to do these things. Someone taught him how to do these things. So Ali ibn Abi Talib says, you're the one who is that speck of dust. All of it. Even when He brought you here, then He had to teach you that, listen, if you're not comfortable, cry. Because if you cry, then your mother will come, your aunts will come, everyone will come, yeah? If you're hungry, yeah? Scratch the chest of your mother a little bit, yeah? Struggle it, then they'll come. You say, oh, this is all natural. No, it's not natural. Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying somebody inspired you for all of this. So then that was you, the one who had none of these things. Someone had to teach you all of the basics. Now you've come all of this way, and now you're looking back and you see yourself as an independent being. You're like, yeah, I did all of this on my own. No, what do you mean you did all of it on your own? God is a part of everything you do because you need Him in everything you do. And this is why verse 19 from Surah 59, Surah Al-Hashr, is a very key verse in this whole discussion, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something that for me personally, growing up, hearing it in lectures, never made sense to me. Always hear this verse in lectures, never made sense to me. But if you understand this discussion we had, now it makes a little bit more sense. The Quran says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. Don't be like those people who do this. You know, the Quran has this terminology. Yeah, you know, sometimes we say, you don't want to be that guy, right? We say, don't be that guy. The Quran is saying, Don't be like those people. Like who? وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. Don't be like those people who forgot about God. Okay, so what happens if I forget about God? There's a bunch of people, they don't even think about God, not even once a year. Seems like their life is going very well. What's the problem? He says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Because they forget who they are themselves. What do you mean they forget who they are themselves? Because you are that being that can't exist on your own. The moment you take God out of the picture, there's no more you. You don't exist anymore. You forget about who you are. You can't picture who you are without God being part of the equation. You forget about God? Okay, great. You're lost in life. You have no idea who you are. You will forget who you are yourself. Because you are that being that is constantly reliant on God. That's your definition. That's who your identity is. The moment you take God out of that equation, there's no more you anymore. You're not independent. You have nothing to your name. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. They are the ones who end up disobeying God. The one who thinks he's independent. God's out the picture, so now he thinks he's his own thing. Now he gives himself permission to do as he wishes. So now he has fisq. Now he has open sinning. Now he commits sins. He does this, he does that. Because he lost and forgot who he was. Why? Because he took God out of the equation. You know what the foundational identity of the human being is? At its very core, where this presents itself in the most manifest, in the most clear way, is when at the end of the life of this human being, they bring the body, they say, we're going to do Salatul Mayyit now. Salatul Mayyit, that Muslims will do, Shia and Sunni will do. When they want to recite the Salatul Mayyit, I'm sure many have already attended in the past, there are lines that are to be recited. These lines are to be recited by everyone who's part of this Salatul Mayyit. The Imam is not supposed to recite on your behalf like a normal Jama'ah, right? You do it in Jama'ah, but you recite all the lines yourself. There's 5 takbirs in Salatul Mayyit. And after every takbir, certain lines you say, yes? There's the kalima you say, and then you pray for all the believers, you do all of these things, yes? Until you come to the last lines you're going to mention before the 5th takbir and the salat is over. This last, between takbir 4 and 5, you're going to talk about this mayyit who's in front of you. All the other things are general stuff. Yes, when I say general stuff, not that they're not important, but you're talking about general concepts. Between 4 and 5, this mayyit who is in front of us. I want to be careful not to point to any of the dear brothers here. This mayyit who is in front of us. So what do you say in these lines? This person who had a million different identities, he was a lawyer, he had this ethnicity, he had that last name. Baba, he had a last name. When he used to say this last name, people would just, be like, yeah, whatever you want. We all know people who are like that. He had the identity of the type of wealth. When he walked in, people were like, yeah, sure. We can make it happen. He had these identities. He had the identity of a certain class of society, all of these different identities. Okay, now everything is all said and done. And now we're going to talk about this mayyit, but look at how you talk about him to God. So you start, you say, Allahumma inna hadha al-musajja quddamana. Oh Allah, this one who's lying in front of us. Now you're going to refer to him, so you have to use his identity. Right? That's what identity is for, to point to things. Allahumma inna hadha al-musajja quddamana. Okay, so what is his identity? Abduka wa ibnu abdika wa ibnu amatik. He's a servant of yours who was also born from a male servant and a female servant. Baba, what happened? He had all this whole life of his. All these identities. He had this story and this experiences and all this kind of stuff. What about all of that? You say, yeah, that kind of stuff doesn't matter anymore. Those identities were all cool and nice. Yeah, wonderful, great job. But then at the most foundational level, this was his identity. If he utilized those other ones to build more of this, great. If he didn't, he just had those other identities, well, that's fine. They're not necessarily haram either, but it's fine. but they don't have much value today. It doesn't matter much today anymore. عبدك وابن عبدك وابن أمتك نزل بك وأنت خير منزول به. The only thing that matters now is that he's come to you, and well, you're the best one to come towards. You're the most welcoming to come towards. Okay, so now what matters now? Allahumma inna la na'lamu minhu illa khayra wa anta a'lamu bihi minna. Allahumma in kana muhsinan fazid fi ihsanah. Oh Allah, if he did well, in other words, i.e. translation, if he was a good servant, fazid fi ihsanah, he took steps towards you, oh Allah, out of your mercy, out of your grace, out of your fadla, add to his goodness. وَإِن كَانَ مُسِيئًا فَتَجَاوَزْ عَنْهُ. And if he didn't do well, then, oh Allah, forgive him. What's your most foundational identity? Your most foundational identity is that you are that existence that cannot breathe or live on its own. Everything else is on the outer layers of your existence. If you go to your very core, this is who you are. Okay, wonderful. This is my most foundational identity. It's humbling, but I'll take it because the Quran is saying so. So if this is my most foundational identity, this leads us to our discussion for tomorrow night. And then the Quran is going to tell you now, if this is your most foundational identity, when you take on other identities, that's not a problem. Only when they clash with this one overrides them. If they don't clash, fine. A lot of times they won't. Some identities will never clash with this. No problem. Sometimes they will. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from you and I that because this is the most foundational identity of yours, this is the most important thing that makes you who you are, if anything clashes with this one, this gets preference. This one gets precedence. This one gets to override everything else. If you start to override this one and give preference to other things, then you're forgetting who you are truly. And tomorrow night, we will talk about how a human being can sometimes give preference to this identity and how the human being sometimes can make the big mistake of giving preference to his other identities. With that, inshallah, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. Let us take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat, and especially for the marhumin and marhumat of all of those who have worked hard to make these majalis possible. رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
ثانية لتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان. Before we begin our majlis, we share two small announcements, inshallah. Number one, the Ashura Project Youth Program begins tonight and is held every night during the Arabic program. It's an educational program held in the classrooms for young boys and girls ages 4 to 12 that includes activities, majalis, latmiyat, and contests. Please see the youth program coordinator in the hall on the left-hand side for more information. Number two is the Al-Qasim alayhi salam Youth Contest, which is an educational online questionnaire contest for youth of ages 8 to 14. The contest form will be available at the hall entrance and online at ashuraproject.org. And all forms must be submitted via the collection boxes and prior to Friday, July 28th or the 10th of Muharram. The prizes will include a tablet, AirPods, and mini drones, and winners will be announced after Arba'een, inshallah. In Ziyarat al-Nahiya, which has been narrated by Imam al-Mahdi Ajalallah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, the Imam alayhi salam says, "Peace be upon you from one who knows your rank, one who is sincere in following you, one who's clean-handed from your enemies. Peace be upon you from one whose heart is pierced over your calamity, one whose tears upon your mentioning fall. Peace be upon you from one who's afflicted and sad. Peace from one who, were he to be with you in Karbala, would have sacrificed himself to defend you among the swords, and made his soul ransom for you until death, and battled alongside of you, and made you victorious amongst those who fought you, and sacrificed his body, soul, money, and children for you, and whose soul for yours is ransom, and whose family for yours is sacrifice. For since time has delayed me, and destiny to hinder me from making you victorious, and I not be a fighter to those who fought you, and an enemy to those who took you enemy, then I lament you day and night, and I will cry blood instead of tears over you, heartbroken over you, and sad upon what you went through, until I die from this tormenting tragedy and aching sorrow. Every night, my brothers and sisters, over these 10 nights, we will remind ourselves and our brothers and sisters why we're here. Every night we will recite a hadith, the accounts of the Prophet or Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam crying over Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or discussing the importance of these majalis. And every night together we will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the privilege of knowing the right and rank of the Imam through a famous dua that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam taught one of his companions, that I kindly ask you all to recite with me. Allahumma arifni nafsak, فإنك إن لم تعرفني نفسك لم أعرف رسولك. اللهم عرفني رسولك فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. اللهم عرفني حجتك فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. Please help me welcome the reciter of the Husseini Majlis tonight, Brother Hassan Bazoon, with a loud salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
لتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب الزمان رحم الله من أعاد الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. عظم الله مصابنا عظم الله لكم أجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام. To Karbala we journey with our hearts. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آلك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب ونجاة الأمة. May the peace of Allah fall upon the benevolent heart of Imam Hussein. May the peace of Allah be upon you, Aba Abdullah, as you are His vast mercy and the salvation of this ummah. Mazloom, Ya Hussein, Ghareeb, Ya Hussein, Shaheed, Ya Hussein. A stranger you were in Karbala. Together. A stranger you were in Karbala. Ya. Let Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam hear us tonight. Let Imam al-Hussein and Imam al-Mahdi hear us. A stranger you were in Karbala. Ya. Parched you were in Karbala, Ya. Martyred you fell in Karbala, Ya Hussein. May the salutations of Allah fall upon you and your honorable family who stood by your side in Karbala. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله كل عين باكية يوم القيامة إلا عين بكت على مصاب الحسين. Our holy Prophet صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم is narrated to have said, every eye will shed a tear on the day of judgment, except for the eye that shed tears for the tragedy of Hussein. That eye will be happy and awaiting rewards. And one of our Imams has said, أيما مؤمن دمعت عيناه لقتل الحسين دمعة حتى تسيل على خده بوأه الله في الجنة غرفا. One of our Imams has said, any believer whose eyes shed a tear for the killing of Hussein, the son of Ali, until this tear runs down his cheek, Allah will grant him spacious rooms in paradise that he shall inhabit for everlasting times. Tonight is the 1st of Muharram, and we call Sayyidi Ya Aba Abdullah, my master, Ya Hussein. I ask you, what is this great calamity that you experience, in which if we shed an honest tear in grief over you, we open the doors of mercy to Allah, of mercy of Allah. Ya Aba Abdullah, was it because you were surrounded by thousands of enemies, thirsty under the scorching sun, yet you refused to give up your principles? Or is it because you witnessed the most beloved of your sons, Ali al-Akbar and Abdullah al-Radi', and your nephews Al-Qasim and the brothers of Al-Qasim and others like Akbar and Qasim, did you see them? Is it because you saw them get slain before your eyes and you remained steadfast in trusting Allah? Or was it because when you fell off your horse and your noble face landed upon the burning sand, that you reached out in dua to Allah, reciting His praise, and never wavered from your faith? Sayyidi Ya Aba Abdullah, indeed you are the door to Allah's mercy. And in your sacrifice you preserved for us the true message of Rasulullah. Yes, brothers and sisters, the tears that we shed for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the agony that we feel when we recall his story year after year is what safeguards our faith and brings us into the unending mercy of Allah. With this first night of Muharram, let's recall our Imam as he stood in Karbala, lonely, wounded, against a merciless army. And he raised his bloodied hands towards the heavens and beseeched Allah, saying, أَرَضِيتَ يَا رَبِّ خُذْ حَتَّى تَرْضَى. Are you pleased, my Lord? Take from me until you are pleased with my sacrifice for you. Together, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Salam ya Hussein. Salam. Salam from our ailing hearts upon your holy grave. Salam from our weeping eyes to our Imam so brave. Salam upon your noble body as you fell off your steed. Yani when he fell off the horse to the ground in Karbala. Salam, what happens when he falls off the horse and he's wounded? Salam upon your face that over the sand bleeds. Salam to you and salam to you and your baby buried in your arms. Salam to you and your son Ali, heart pierced in harm. Salam, there's more, to Sukaina and Zainab, for you weeping hard. Salam, lest we forget. Salam to your brother Abbas, the righteous guard. Salam ya Hussein on Muharram's first night. Yes, brothers and sisters, the tragedy of Imam Hussein breaks the hearts and sheds the tears of every believer. However, this tragedy breaks not only our hearts, but also the heart of our beloved Sayyida Fatima alayha salam, as she also sheds her tears with us and joins those who mourn her son Hussein in their sorrow. Ya Zahra, لك العزاء. Ya Zahra, accept our condolences for your beloved Hussein, who was thirsty and alone in Karbala. But it's not just Sayyida Fatima. Along with Sayyida Fatima alayha salam, tonight the heart of our 12th Imam is broken. Al-Imam al-Mahdi also weeps for the tragedy of his grandfather Hussein. He says, لأبكين عليك بدل الدموع دما حسرة عليك وتلهفا. He says to the Imam, to Imam Hussein in his ziyarah, he says, I shall shed blood in place of tears over you, and sorrow and grief of what befell you. Brothers and sisters, let's imagine if Sayyida Fatima Zahra Salamullahi alayha and Al-Imam Al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajah, if Sayyida Fatima was to speak to Al-Imam Al-Mahdi about what happened to Imam Hussein in Karbala, what would she say? Ya Mahdi, my son Hussein was in Karbala slain. Ya Mahdi, wounded he was when he alone remained. Ya Mahdi, his sons before him, yani in front of his eyes, his sons before him butchered and maimed. There's more. Ya Mahdi, his face covered with blood and sand. Ya Mahdi, he cried for Zainab when he could no longer stand. Ya Mahdi, they then raised his head on the spear. If the Imam was to respond to his grandmother Fatima, Ya Zahra, for Hussein in blood I wept and cried. Ya Zahra, as I recall his prayers before he died. Ya Zahra, they trampled his body from every side. Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra with the Imam, Ya Zahra, I await the time when I will rise and raise his banner to the heavenly skies. My call to the world will be loud and clear. My grandfather Hussein was butchered in Karbala, thirsty. ألا يا أهل العالم إن جدي الحسين ذبح عطشانا. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, we ask you and call upon you by your greatest name, the mightiest, the most honorable, to send your blessings and praise upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And that you accept of us our worship. We ask that you send your mercy upon the dead of the believing men and women. We ask you by Hussein, by Zahra, by Al-Mahdi, we ask you by Hussein the martyr and his mother and father. Whoever was in this gathering of ours has a need, that you fulfill it for them. We pray that you relieve the suffering of all those oppressed, and that you hasten the return of our 12th Imam. Ya Allah, may the peace of Allah be upon the noble Hussein, the children of Hussein and the family of Hussein. May the peace of Allah be upon the noble Abbas and the honorable Zainab together. Assalamu ala al-Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحوراء زينب أخت الحسين. السلام على أبي الفضل العباس أخي الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. وإلى أرواح الشهداء والعلماء وأموات المؤمنين والمؤمنات جميعا، لا سيما أموات الحضور والقائمين على هذا المجلس. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
Ten years ago, we embarked on a mission to revive the true values of Islam within our community. Empowered by the faith and dedication of our volunteers and your endless support, our projects impacted the lives of tens of thousands in our community and beyond. Since day one, our effort was recognized as one being led by the youth, and the youth have always been at the center of our focus. Our goal was and remains to instill Islamic values that enlighten the young generation, strengthen their identity, and empower them to become successful leaders in the future. But as the times we are in become more challenging every day, and our values are consistently under attack, we cannot stand still, and having a facility that allows for bigger and better projects became a necessity. Alhamdulillah, today, Taha Foundation, the parent organization of the Ashura Project and Al-Mustafa Scouts, is pleased, honored, and excited to announce the next milestone in our journey. As of May 5th, we have completed the purchase of the upcoming Taha Foundation Community Center, a 48,000 square foot facility that has the amenities we need to improve and expand our programs, including a lecture hall, classrooms, a gym, and a spacious outdoor gathering area. While we are able to secure the purchase of this building, a lot of work is still required to transform it into the state-of-the-art facility that serves our needs in the most effective and efficient way possible. Today, more than ever, and for the sake of our kids and families, we're asking for your support in raising the funds needed for this project. Our fundraising target is $580,000 that will go towards renovations, repairs, furniture, and equipment. Your contribution, no matter how small, will make a significant difference. Join us as we embark on the next stage of our journey. With Allah's guidance and your support, we can empower the next generation of leaders and build a better future for our youth. Donate today.